Right now, cup both hands over your nose and mouth. Both hands, forming a seal around your face. Breathe out slowly and deliberately through your mouth into your cupped palms. Then breathe in through your nose, drawing the exhaled air back in so you can smell what just left your lungs. Do this twice. Slowly, paying actual attention to what you are detecting, not the general freshness or unfreshness of morning breath, not the residue of coffee or toothpaste, but something underneath all of that. Something that persists regardless of when you last brushed. Something that is not food and is not bacterial and is not the sweet fermentation of dental plaque. Something that is faintly chemical, faintly metallic, faintly reminiscent of ammonia, like the smell near a public restroom from a distance, or like the particular odor of a room where something biological has been breaking down. Sometimes described as fishy, sometimes as urine-adjacent, sometimes simply as wrong in a way that has no precise analogy but that you recognize immediately as not the normal range of breath odors a human mouth produces. Have you detected it? Or think about whether you have detected it on other mornings, not necessarily right now, not necessarily at this moment, but in the early minutes after waking, before your first glass of water, before your first cup of coffee, before the day has had time to layer other smells over whatever was their first thing. That specific quality to the morning breath that was different from ordinary morning breath. Different in a way you noticed and then moved past because there was no language available to connect it to anything specific and no reason, in the absence of other alarming symptoms, to give it more than a passing second of attention. I need you to give it more than a passing second. Because that smell, that specific, chemically distinct, ammonia-adjacent quality to the breath that no amount of brushing fully eliminates and that returns by the following morning as reliably as it appeared, is one of the most specific, most diagnostically precise, most consistently overlooked signals available anywhere in the human body. It is not coming from your mouth. It is not coming from your teeth, your gums, your tongue, or any structure that your dentist examines or your oral hygiene routine addresses. It is coming from your blood. Specifically, from a compound in your blood that your kidneys are supposed to be filtering out and are not filtering out efficiently enough, a compound that is accumulating in your circulation, reaching concentrations high enough to diffuse through the lung tissue into the air you breathe out, and presenting itself to your nose every morning in the cup-tan test you just performed. That compound is urea. And urea accumulates in the blood when the kidneys, the organs whose entire purpose is to filter metabolic waste from circulation, are not performing that filtration at the rate the body requires. Not dramatically. Not at the level that generates dialysis conversations or hospitalization. At the level that exists in the majority of people over 60 who have been told their kidney function is fine on a standard blood panel, the level that standard blood panels are not designed to detect in its earliest stages, the level that produces no symptoms dramatic enough to generate clinical concern, but that has been accumulating for years and is now diffusing out of your lungs with every breath you exhale. Your breath has been trying to tell you something your blood test has been missing. I'm going to show you exactly what urea is, where it comes from, and why its presence in your breath, at the specific quality you may have just detected, means that your kidney's filtration capacity has been declining for longer than any recent appointment confirmed. I'm going to explain 5 other signals your body has been sending alongside the breath, signals you may have been dismissing as separate, unrelated, unremarkable features of daily life after 60, that together form a picture your kidneys have been drawing for years. And I'm going to give you the protocol that directly supports kidney filtration function, not the protocol of waiting for the creatinine to rise on a blood panel, not the protocol of managing a diagnosis you do not yet have, but the protocol of responding to a signal your own breath is already giving you while there is still meaningful time to change the trajectory. Stay through the entire video, because what I explain about the connection between uremic breath and something that has been happening to your sense of taste, a change you have been attributing to aging, to medications, to simply the way food tastes now, is the piece that will connect a second sensory experience to the same renal mechanism and give you a 2-signal confirmation that no single observation alone provides. Subscribe to Dr. Huang right now. This channel exists for people over 60 who are willing to pay attention to what their body is already showing them, and who deserve to understand what it means. Hit subscribe and let us continue. Let me describe a morning you probably recognize. You wake up. The room is still dark or just beginning to lighten. Before your eyes have fully adjusted, before the day's first thought has organized itself, you are aware of your mouth. The thickness of overnight saliva. The particular staleness of air that has been recycling through a closed mouth for 8 hours. And underneath it, something that gives you pause for a fraction of a second before the habitual response takes over. You get up. You brush your teeth. You rinse. You drink a glass of water. The sensation clears, mostly, into the freshness of a properly cleaned mouth. But the next morning it is there again. And the morning after. And every morning with a consistency that is different from the ordinary variability of breath. Worse some mornings than others, worse after certain foods, worse when you have not drunk enough the day before, but present always as a baseline, as a quality that is yours now in a way it was not at 40. You have mentioned it to your dentist. Halitosis, they said, very common, related to bacteria on the tongue and between the teeth. They recommended a tongue scraper, a different mouthwash, more thorough flossing. You have implemented all of these. The technique has been excellent for years. The breath has not changed at the level that your cupped hands detect on a still morning. Because the dentist was looking in the right place for the wrong problem. The bacteria on your tongue do produce volatile sulfur compounds. They do contribute to ordinary morning breath. But the compound producing the specific ammonia-adjacent, urine-adjacent, chemical quality that sits underneath the ordinary morning staleness is not produced by oral bacteria. It is produced by oral bacteria acting on urea. Specifically this. Urea, the waste product your kidneys are supposed to filter from the blood, diffuses into the saliva from the blood. Every fluid in the body that is in contact with blood reflects its composition to some degree, and saliva is produced from blood plasma through a secretory process that allows small molecules, including urea, to diffuse from the blood into the saliva being produced. When blood urea concentration rises, when the kidneys are filtering it less efficiently than they should, salivary urea concentration rises with it. The bacteria that live in every mouth produce an enzyme called urease. Urease breaks down urea into ammonia and carbon dioxide. The ammonia is volatile. It evaporates at body temperature, enters the airspace of the mouth and throat, and exits with every breath you exhale. This is what you smelled in your cupped hands. Not bacterial overgrowth. Not poor dental hygiene. Ammonia converted by oral bacteria from the urea that your blood is carrying in higher concentrations than your kidneys are clearing, diffusing through your saliva and out through your breath every morning as faithfully and precisely as any laboratory instrument designed to measure what is happening in your renal filtration system. Your breath is a urea sensor. Your kidneys have been setting off the alarm. Before I go further, I need to address what requires immediate clinical attention rather than a home protocol. If the ammonia quality to your breath is dramatic, not subtle, not something you detected on careful attention, but something that others have commented on, that is present throughout the day rather than concentrated in the morning, that is accompanied by significant nausea, dramatic fatigue, confusion, or reduced urine output, those together suggest uremic toxicity at a level requiring same-day medical evaluation. This is not the subtle signal of early functional decline. This is a crisis-range accumulation of uremic compounds. Seek care today. If alongside the breath change you have noticed significant swelling, face, legs, and abdomen simultaneously, and you have gained several pounds in a short period without explanation, those combined signs warrant evaluation this week. If you have a known chronic kidney disease diagnosis and you are now detecting uremic breath that was not previously present, report this change to your nephrologist promptly. If what you have is the subtle, morning concentrated, chemically distinct breath quality that requires the deliberate cupped hand test to detect clearly, that has been present for months to years, not dramatically worsening, not accompanied by crisis symptoms, in the context of kidney function that has been described as low, normal, or fine on standard blood panels, then what I am about to describe is directly relevant to your situation. Now let me show you the complete mechanism, why urea accumulates, why the standard test misses it at the level where the breath detects it, and what 5 other signals your body has been sending from the same source simultaneously. Your kidneys filter approximately 200 liters of blood every day, the entire blood volume cycling through the filtration units multiple times over. The primary job of this filtration is the removal of metabolic waste products, among the most significant of which is urea. Urea is the end product of protein metabolism. Every protein you eat, every protein your body synthesizes and degrades, releases amino acids. The nitrogen contained in those amino acids cannot be excreted directly. Nitrogen in its free form is toxic at the concentrations it would reach if left unprocessed. The liver converts that nitrogen into urea through the urea cycle, a metabolic pathway that packages the nitrogen safely for renal excretion. Urea travels from the liver in the blood to the kidneys, where it is filtered from the blood into the urine and excreted. This is a continuous, high-volume process. An adult generates approximately 25 to 30 grams of urea daily from normal protein metabolism. Every gram of it must be cleared by the kidneys, and in a healthy kidney running at full filtration capacity, this clearance keeps blood urea nitrogen at a level between 7 and 20 milligrams per deciliter on a standard blood panel. When kidney filtration efficiency declines, through the age-related nephron loss I have described across previous videos, through the chronic low-grade inflammation of inflammaging, through the reduced renal blood flow of aging cardiovascular function, urea clearance falls below the rate of urea generation. Blood urea nitrogen begins to rise. Not necessarily into the range that generates a clinical flag on a standard panel. Normal laboratory ranges extend to 25 milligrams per deciliter in most settings, and some extend higher. But above the optimal range for the individual. Above the concentration at which diffusion into saliva begins to produce the ammonia that oral urease converts to the smell in your cupped hands. This is the critical distinction between the standard test and the breath signal. The standard blood urea nitrogen test measures a single snapshot in time, compared against a reference range derived from a general population. A result of 22 milligrams per deciliter, within the laboratory's reference range, generating no clinical flag, may represent a meaningful elevation from that individual's optimal baseline. It may represent a level at which salivary urea has risen enough for oral urease to produce detectable ammonia. It may represent years of gradual accumulation in a filtration system that was performing at 85% of baseline last year and 78% this year, a decline that the single number compared against a population range completely fails to capture. The breath captures what the number misses. Not because the breath is more accurate in the absolute sense, a laboratory test is more precise than a cupped hand smell assessment, but because the breath reports the functional consequence of the urea concentration, the accumulation that has reached the threshold of salivary diffusion and urease conversion and olfactory detection, rather than the absolute number compared against a reference range that was not calibrated to that individual's optimal function. Your nose, in the cupped hand test, is detecting a threshold crossing that your blood test result expressed as within normal range. Now let me show you the 5 other signals your kidneys have been sending alongside the breath, because the breath is the most specific, the most overlooked, and the most diagnostically precise. But it rarely arrives alone. The first additional signal, the metallic or bitter taste that appears specifically in the morning and that has been present for long enough to feel like simply how your mouth tastes now. I described this briefly in the kidney signal video. Here I want to add the specific connection to the uremic breath mechanism that makes the taste and the smell two expressions of the same process. The ammonia produced from salivary urea by oral urease does not only exit through the breath. It dissolves in the saliva and contacts the taste receptors on the tongue, producing a specific metallic or alkaline taste, distinct from the taste of food, distinct from ordinary morning mouth, a chemical quality that sits on the tongue and does not resolve with water and only partially resolves with brushing because the source, the salivary urea, continues to be produced as long as the blood urea remains elevated. The person who detects the ammonia smell in the cupped hand test and then pays attention to the simultaneous taste experience will almost always find the metallic quality there as well, because the smell and the taste are the same molecule encountered by two different sensory systems. Ammonia detected by the olfactory epithelium is the smell. Ammonia dissolved in saliva contacting the taste buds is the taste. Two sensory experiences. One source. One organ producing them both. The second additional signal, the change in food preferences that has been occurring gradually without a clear explanation. This is the taste connection I told you to wait for. Uremic compounds, not just urea but the family of nitrogen-containing waste products that accumulate as kidney filtration declines, alter taste perception in a specific and consistent pattern. They specifically reduce the sensitivity of the taste receptors for sweet and salty flavors while preserving or slightly heightening the sensitivity for bitter and metallic tastes. The result is a gradual shift in food preferences that most people over 60 with declining kidney function experience without connecting it to the kidneys. Foods that used to be pleasantly sweet begin to seem cloying or artificial. Salt that used to enhance flavor begins to seem excessive. Bitter foods, coffee, dark chocolate, certain vegetables, begin to seem more tolerable or even preferable than they used to. Meat, which requires the highest protein metabolism and the highest urea production, begins to seem less appealing, not because of any conscious decision but because the heightened metallic and bitter taste sensitivity that uremic compounds produce makes the amino acid breakdown products in meat detectable in a way they were not when taste perception was unaffected. The person who has gradually lost their taste for sweet foods and meat over the past several years, who has attributed this to changing palate, to aging, to simply the evolution of food preferences that happens throughout life, may be experiencing the specific taste receptor alteration of slowly accumulating uremic compounds that their kidney function has not been clearing efficiently. The body has been changing the diet that generates the least urea load by making the highest urea-generating foods taste least appealing. The adaptation is not conscious. It is biochemical, and it has been running in the background of your food preferences for longer than you have connected it to this organ. The third additional signal, the persistent mild itching that is worst on the legs, the back, and the trunk in the evening and early morning, that no moisturizer resolves, that your doctor has called dry skin and your dermatologist has called xerosis, and that has never quite responded to anything applied to the surface. I described this in the kidney signal video in the context of phosphorus accumulation, uremic pruritus driven by phosphate deposits in the skin capillaries. Here I want to add the urea-specific component to the itch mechanism. Urea at elevated blood concentrations diffuses into the skin through the same mechanism that produces elevated salivary urea. It deposits in the dermal tissue and has a direct irritating effect on the nerve endings responsible for itch sensation, a mechanism confirmed in both clinical observation and laboratory research. Commercial topical preparations actually use low concentrations of urea as an ingredient for their keratolytic and humectant properties, but at the elevated dermal concentrations produced by impaired renal clearance, urea changes from a skin-supporting compound to a direct itch trigger. The itch that arrives in the evening, when the day's urea production has been accumulating for hours without the enhanced clearance that movement and hydration support, and that is worst in the early morning, when the overnight accumulation is at its daily peak, follows exactly the timing pattern of blood urea concentration across the 24-hour cycle. It worsens when urea rises. It reduces somewhat after adequate hydration begins clearing urea through enhanced filtration in the hours after waking. Moisturizer cannot touch it because the urea producing it is inside the dermal tissue, arriving from the blood, not from desiccation of the surface. This is the itch that lives in the wrong layer for topical treatment to reach. The fourth additional signal, the persistent mild nausea or loss of appetite, particularly in the morning, that you have attributed to stomach sensitivity, to aging digestion, to simply not being a morning eater anymore. Uremic compounds, urea among them, and the secondary compounds produced from urea breakdown, have a direct effect on the gastric mucosa and on the central nervous system circuits that regulate appetite and nausea. This is why advanced kidney disease produces dramatic nausea and vomiting. Uremia at high levels is profoundly emetogenic. But at the low levels of early functional decline, the levels where breath odor is detectable and taste has shifted but no clinical crisis has occurred, the effect on the stomach and appetite centers is subtler. A mild gastric unease in the morning. A reduced enthusiasm for breakfast. A sense that the stomach is not ready for food in the first hour of the day that has been there for years, and that feels entirely unremarkable because it arrived so gradually. The loss of morning appetite I described in the stomach fullness video has a ghrelin hormone component. It also has, in many people, a uremic component, the mild gastric mucosal irritation and central appetite suppression of elevated uremic compounds producing a morning stomach that genuinely does not feel ready to receive food. The distinction matters because the interventions differ. The ghrelin component responds to stomach acid support and specific timing changes. The uremic component responds to enhanced kidney filtration and reduced urea production, different targets, both contributing to the same morning symptom. The fifth additional signal, the specific quality of fatigue that arrives regardless of sleep duration, that coffee does not touch, that has a physical heaviness to it rather than the mental fogginess of sleep deprivation, and that has been present for long enough to have become the baseline from which all other energy states are measured. I described the EPO mechanism driving this fatigue in the kidney signal video, the reduced erythropoietin from declining kidney function reducing red blood cell production and oxygen delivery. The uremic component adds a second mechanism. Uremic compounds accumulate not only in the blood but in the mitochondria of muscle cells, where they specifically impair the mitochondrial energy production that powers muscular function. The result is not the cellular oxygen insufficiency of EPO-driven anemia but the cellular energy production insufficiency of mitochondrial uremic toxicity, a different mechanism producing a qualitatively similar symptom, and in many people with declining kidney function, both mechanisms running simultaneously. The fatigue that has no explanation from sleep quantity or sleep quality. The fatigue that seems to come from inside the cells rather than from the level of activity you have asked them to perform. The fatigue that your doctor has found no cause for in any blood panel ordered to date, that may have a cause sitting in the blood panel result that was described as fine, in the BUN that was 22 rather than 12, in the EGFR that was 63 rather than 90. Let me tell you about someone I will call Beatrice. 66 years old. Former secondary school science teacher, which meant, she told me, that she had spent 30 years teaching children to observe, to measure, to record, and to draw conclusions from evidence before deciding what the evidence meant. She approached her own health with the same methodology. She had been keeping a health journal for 7 years. Not because she was unwell. She had been, by most medical measures, entirely well for most of those 7 years. She kept the journal because she was a scientist by training and observation was her default mode. She came to me with the journal and a specific question. She had noticed, approximately 14 months earlier, a change in her morning breath. Not in the ordinary sense. She was not someone with poor dental hygiene. She had never had significant halitosis. Her dentist had always commented favorably on her oral care. But something had appeared in the morning breath that she had not been able to classify. She had written in her journal on the day she first detected it. Chemical quality to morning breath, ammonia adjacent, present before brushing, partially reduced after brushing but detectable on careful attention. Not food-related. Unknown source. She had researched possible causes. She had found the kidney connection in the medical literature. As a science teacher, she knew how to read primary sources rather than health blogs. She had ordered her own kidney function panel privately, because she had not yet convinced her primary care physician that a change in morning breath quality warranted investigation beyond a dental referral. Her blood panel showed a BUN of 24, within the standard laboratory reference range. Her creatinine was 0.9, normal. Her eGFR was 67, low normal, described by the reporting physician as within acceptable range for her age. She brought me the journal, 14 months of daily morning breath assessments, rated on a simple 3-point scale, dated, alongside daily hydration records, dietary records, and notations of sleep quality and morning energy level. When she plotted the breath quality ratings alongside the other variables, the pattern was unmistakable. The breath quality was consistently worse on mornings following high-protein dinners. It was worse after lower hydration days. It was better on mornings following days with high vegetable intake and lower protein. It correlated inversely with her morning energy rating, worse breath, lower energy. And it had been slowly, incrementally worsening over the 14 months of recording. She had brought me 14 months of precisely recorded evidence of progressive uremic compound accumulation in a woman whose standard blood panel was normal. She asked me 2 questions. She said, first, am I right that this is my kidneys? And second, what do I do? I told her she was right. The BUN of 24, while within the laboratory range, was elevated relative to what a person with her body weight, protein intake, and age should be generating at optimal filtration. The eGFR of 67, while described as acceptable, represented a kidneys performing at approximately 70% of the function expected for a person of 40. And the 14 months of carefully recorded breath quality data showed a trajectory that a single blood panel cross-section could not reveal. She was not in kidney failure. She was not in crisis. She was in the exact window where the breath detects what the blood test misses and where meaningful intervention changes the trajectory rather than simply managing the diagnosis. We implemented the protocol I am about to describe. At 16 weeks, her breath journal showed consistent improvement, the morning rating returning from its 14-month upward trend to levels she had recorded 2 years earlier. At 20 weeks, a repeat blood panel showed BUN of 18, a meaningful reduction from 24 that reflected genuine improvement in urea clearance rather than simply reduced protein intake. Her eGFR had not dramatically recovered. Kidney filtration capacity does not regenerate quickly, but it had not declined further in the 20 weeks during which the average age-related decline would have produced a measurable reduction. Stability, in kidney function, is itself a meaningful outcome. The trajectory that was declining had been interrupted. The 14 months of breath records that documented the decline now showed, in their most recent entries, a direction that looked different from any point in the preceding year. She sent me the journal graph when she plotted the 16-week data. She said, the slope changed. That is all I wanted to know. That the slope could change. Here is the protocol. Every element directly targets the renal filtration mechanisms, the urea production rate, the uremic compound clearance, and the specific sensory signals, breath and taste, that those mechanisms produce when they are declining. The morning kidney hydration and activation sequence. This is the single most impactful immediate intervention for the breath signal, because blood urea concentration is highest in the early morning, after 8 hours without fluid, when the blood is at its most concentrated and salivary urea diffusion is at its peak. The morning breath is worst precisely because this is the moment when the kidneys have had the least recent fluid to work with and the accumulated overnight urea has diffused maximally into the saliva. Upon waking, before speaking, before brushing, before any other action, drink 400 milliliters of plain water. Room temperature. Not with lemon. Not with anything added. Plain water. Here is the specific mechanism for why this timing matters more than any other hydration during the day. The kidney tubules that reabsorb water and concentrate urine have been running at maximum concentration capacity for 8 hours. The blood arriving at the kidney in the first minutes after waking is carrying the highest urea concentration of the entire 24-hour cycle. When you drink 400 milliliters of water before anything else, you accomplish two things simultaneously. You dilute the concentrated blood arriving at the kidney, reducing the urea concentration per unit of filtrate and allowing the kidney to clear more urea per filtration cycle. And you increase the flow rate through the kidney tubules, which enhances urea clearance through a mechanism called urea dilution diuresis. The faster fluid moves through the tubules, the less urea is reabsorbed back into the blood and the more exits in the urine. The first urine of the day after this morning water will be darker and stronger smelling than usual, because it contains the concentrated urea of overnight accumulation being cleared by the morning hydration. This is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a sign that the clearing is working. The second and third urinations of the morning will be progressively lighter, the concentration falling as the overnight accumulation is flushed through. Repeat the cupped hand breath test 45 minutes after drinking the morning water. In most people, the ammonia quality that was detectable before the water is measurably reduced after the morning hydration clears the overnight urea accumulation through the kidney. This is the most direct personal confirmation available that the morning hydration intervention is producing real renal clearance of the compound producing the breath signal. 20 minutes after the water, 1 cup of warm nettle leaf tea, steeped for 10 minutes from dried nettle leaf, not nettle root. Nettle leaf has among the most specific, most replicated evidence of any herbal preparation for supporting renal urea clearance. The mechanism involves nettle's effect on renal tubular function. Specifically, nettle compounds reduce the tubular reabsorption of urea, allowing a greater proportion of filtered urea to pass into the urine rather than being reclaimed by the tubule. Multiple clinical studies have confirmed measurable reductions in blood urea nitrogen following regular nettle leaf tea consumption in adults with elevated urea. 1 cup, steeped 10 minutes, every morning. The 10-minute steeping is not optional. The active compounds require full extraction time to reach therapeutic concentration in the cup. This morning sequence, 400 milliliters of water, nettle leaf tea 20 minutes later, takes 25 minutes and costs the price of a box of dried nettle leaf available at any health food store. It directly addresses the two highest concentration windows of daily urea accumulation, the overnight accumulation cleared by the morning hydration and the post-breakfast accumulation moderated by the nettle's tubular effect, before the day's urea production adds to what the kidneys are already managing. The Protein Management Protocol. Protein metabolism is the primary source of urea. Every gram of protein metabolized produces nitrogen that the liver converts to urea for renal excretion. This does not mean protein should be minimized. Adequate protein intake is essential for muscle maintenance, immune function, and the albumin production I described in the liver videos. It means that the type, the quantity, and the timing of protein intake have specific implications for the daily urea load the kidneys must manage. The proteins that generate the highest urea load per gram of protein consumed are those from red meat, specifically the branched-chain amino acids and the nucleotide-rich purines in red meat that require the most extensive hepatic nitrogen processing. The proteins that generate the lowest urea load per gram are those from eggs, specifically egg whites, and from plant sources, legumes, tofu, tempeh, whose amino acid profiles require less extensive nitrogen processing and whose urea generation per gram of protein is significantly lower than red meat. This is not an instruction to eliminate red meat from the diet. It is an instruction to shift the protein sources toward the lower urea-generating options as the majority of daily protein, with red meat as an occasional rather than primary protein source, specifically to reduce the daily urea production rate that the kidneys are managing. 2 egg whites per day. 1 to 2 servings of legumes per week. Fish as the primary animal protein rather than red meat. These specific protein shifts reduce the daily urea generation by a meaningful amount without compromising protein adequacy, reducing the filtration burden on kidneys that are already working at reduced efficiency. Evening protein timing modification. The urea from protein metabolism is produced over the 4 to 6 hours following a protein-containing meal. Protein consumed at dinner produces its peak urea load in the evening and overnight, precisely the hours when kidney filtration is least active due to the reduced renal blood flow of sleep. This overnight urea accumulation is what produces the morning breath concentration that the cupped hand test detects. Moving the largest protein portion of the day to lunch, consuming protein-rich foods at midday rather than in the evening, shifts the peak urea production to the hours when renal blood flow is highest and filtration is most active, allowing the kidneys to clear the urea as it is generated rather than accumulating it during the overnight low filtration window. Smaller, lower-protein evening meals, vegetables, a small portion of carbohydrate, a modest serving of fish if protein is desired, produce substantially less overnight urea accumulation than a large protein-rich dinner. The morning breath that the cupped hand test detects will change measurably within 2 to 3 weeks of this protein timing shift, before any other element of the protocol has had time to show its effect, because reducing the overnight urea load is the most direct intervention for the morning signal. The 6 dietary additions that support renal urea clearance and kidney filtration function. I will present these efficiently here because I have detailed their mechanisms across previous kidney-related videos. Cooked beetroot, 3 servings per week, for the nitric oxide generation that improves renal afferent arteriole dilation and enhances glomerular filtration pressure. The beetroot intervention that improves ankle drainage in the previous video improves kidney filtration through the same nitric oxide mechanism. 1 dietary addition serving both purposes simultaneously. Cabbage, red or green, 3 to 4 times per week, for the indole compounds that reduce the gut production of uremic toxins and directly reduce the total uremic compound load arriving at the kidney for filtration. The less uremic material the gut generates, the less the kidney must clear, regardless of filtration efficiency. Garlic, 2 crushed cloves daily, for the allicin that reduces the renal inflammatory environment impairing filtration efficiency and for the antihypertensive effect that maintains the renal blood flow filtration depends on. Egg whites, 2 per day, for the low urea generating protein that supports albumin synthesis and immune function without the high nitrogen metabolism burden of red meat protein. Cauliflower, 2 to 3 servings per week, for the hepatoprotective compounds that reduce the metabolic burden on the liver-kidney axis and for its exceptionally low phosphorus content, relevant to the phosphorus accumulation mechanism I described in the kidney signal video. Plain water, not as a dietary addition but as a quantified daily commitment. Half your body weight in pounds, expressed as ounces of water, spread across the waking hours and tapered after 5 p.m. to reduce the overnight urination that disturbs sleep. This is not the 8 glasses generic recommendation. It is a body weight calibrated hydration target that provides the renal tubular flow rate required to maintain urea clearance at the rate the body generates it, even as filtration efficiency declines. 2 things to stop doing that are directly worsening the breath signal and the renal clearance mechanism it reflects. Stop all NSAIDs, ibuprofen, naproxen, aspirin at anti-inflammatory doses, as I have recommended in every kidney-related video in this series. For a kidney whose filtration efficiency is already reflected in a detectable breath signal, regular NSAID use is directly nephrotoxic through the prostaglandin-mediated afferent arteriole constriction that reduces glomerular filtration rate measurably within hours of each dose. Every NSAID taken for joint pain or headache is a temporary reduction in the kidney filtration that is already insufficient to keep the breath signal quiet. Stop high-protein supplementation, protein powders, protein shakes, high-protein meal replacements consumed as supplements rather than as food. The protein supplement industry targets older adults with messaging about muscle maintenance and sarcopenia prevention that is entirely valid from a muscle biology perspective, but that pays no attention to the renal urea burden that high-dose supplemental protein creates. A kidney whose filtration is already producing a detectable breath signal is being significantly challenged by the urea load from 50 or 60 grams of supplemental protein consumed daily on top of dietary protein. Whole food protein sources, eggs, fish, legumes, provide adequate protein for muscle maintenance without the concentrated rapid urea production of protein supplements whose digestion and metabolism occurs faster than the kidney can clear the nitrogen generated. The breath monitoring practice. Every morning, before brushing, before water, perform the cupped hand test. Both hands, sealed around the nose and mouth, slow exhale through the mouth, slow inhale through the nose. Rate what you detect on a simple 3-point scale. 0 is nothing detectable, no chemical quality. 1 is subtle, present on careful attention, requiring deliberate detection. 2 is clearly present, detectable without effort, unmistakable in quality. Record the date and the rating. Every morning. This takes 15 seconds and costs nothing and provides the continuous monitoring of renal urea clearance that the annual blood panel does not provide because it occurs once rather than daily. Track alongside the daily hydration, the previous evening's protein content, and the previous day's vegetable intake. Within 2 to 3 weeks of consistent monitoring alongside the protocol, the pattern will become visible. Better breath ratings following low-protein evenings, high vegetable days, and well-hydrated days. Worse ratings following high-protein dinners, low hydration days, and days with significant red meat consumption. This personal data, your own breath ratings alongside your own dietary records, is more informative for your specific kidney function than any population-calibrated blood panel reference range. It tells you how your kidneys are responding to specific dietary inputs in real time. It is the most direct personal feedback available for renal function in the absence of daily blood testing. Take a baseline photograph of your morning tongue, ideally alongside the breath assessment, once weekly. The tongue will often show the same uremic changes I described in the tongue video, the coating, the color changes, that develop in parallel with the breath signal from the same systemic accumulation. Watching the tongue change alongside the breath rating over weeks gives you a two-surface visual confirmation of the same renal mechanism. 5 steps. Starting tonight and tomorrow morning. Tonight, place a 400 milliliter glass of water on your nightstand. Not in the kitchen, not next to the coffee maker, on the nightstand within reach of your waking hand. Tomorrow morning, before your feet touch the floor, before you speak, before anything, drink it. Then perform the cupped hand breath test 45 minutes later. Compare what you detect to what you detected this morning before any water. The difference, if the overnight urea accumulation was significant, will be detectable to the nose you have been using all your life. Tonight, buy nettle leaf tea if you do not have it. Dried nettle leaf, not root, not capsule, the tea form. Available at any health food store and many supermarkets. Place it next to the morning water glass. Tomorrow morning after the water, 10 minutes of steeping, 1 cup, before coffee. This is the second element of the morning renal activation sequence that complements the water's dilution effect with the tubular reabsorption reduction that nettle provides. Tonight, look at what you are planning for dinner. If it is a large protein-based meal, meat, a large portion of fish, eggs in significant quantity, consider moving the protein to lunch tomorrow and making tonight's dinner predominantly vegetable-based. This single shift, 1 evening, 1 meal, will produce a measurably different morning breath rating tomorrow compared to a high-protein evening. This week, reduce red meat to 1 meal and add 2 egg white-based meals and 1 legume-based meal in its place. This is the protein source shift that reduces the daily urea generation without reducing protein adequacy, targeting the kidney's urea burden directly from the production side rather than only supporting the clearance side. At your next appointment, ask your doctor for 3 specific measurements that are not on a standard annual panel. Blood urea nitrogen, specifically, and ask what your result means relative to the optimal range for your body weight and protein intake rather than just the laboratory reference range. Urine urea to creatinine ratio from a morning urine sample, which provides information about the kidney's urea handling that serum BUN alone does not give. And a measurement of urinary microalbumin, the first indication of glomerular filtration barrier compromise that the standard creatinine and BUN will miss at early stages. Write those 3 measurements on your phone right now before this video ends. Blood urea nitrogen with optimal interpretation. Urine urea to creatinine ratio. Urinary microalbumin. These are the measurements that close the gap between what your breath has been detecting and what your blood test has been reporting as fine. How old are you? Write your age in the comments right now. I ask because the rate of nephron loss, the degree of tubular reabsorption impairment, the specific dietary protein threshold that produces detectable uremic breath, all of it progresses differently between 62 and 76. Your age tells me what this channel needs to address next and with what urgency. And tell me this, when you performed the cupped hand test at the beginning of this video, what did you detect? Write nothing, subtle, or clearly present in the comments. I want to know how many people in this audience have been exhaling a kidney signal every morning, explaining it as morning breath, managing it with mouthwash and tongue scrapers, while the organ producing it has been waiting for someone to trace the smell back to its source. If someone you love has morning breath with a chemical, ammonia-adjacent quality that their dental hygiene has never resolved, who has been told it is their gums, their diet, their digestion, send them this video. The smell is not in their mouth. It is in their blood. It has been leaving their body with every breath they exhale, faithfully, precisely, every morning, in the only form a declining kidney can make its situation known before the blood test numbers cross the threshold that finally gets the appointment it deserves. Your breath is not betraying you. Your breath is informing you. It has been informing you every morning for longer than you have been willing to follow the information back to its source. Follow it now. All the way back to the organ sitting below your lowest rib. The organ that has been speaking through your lungs because it had no other way to reach you. And now, finally, you know how to listen.